Welcome very much to February's last Thursdays. Today we're talking about the state of the development sector. Last year was one that shook many people to their core. USAID was shut down seemingly abruptly, but there were signals of these changes since around 2022, and many countries have followed suit. There was a lot of discussion about this at the time. At Development Dynamics, we issued a survey just to see what exactly were the impacts of these disruptions on organizations working, at the grassroots level and delivering impact where it's needed most. So all these shrinking funding scenarios have obviously evolved since that time, and we're curious to hear from all of you what your reflections you've had so far, what your experience has been. But beyond that, just some framing for today. We intentionally are trying a new approach. We're experimenting with collective sense making. Collective sense making is where we come together to see what a shared interpretation of the current reality might look like. Obviously, each individual, each entity has a certain way they perceive the world based on their experience, based on the things that they have grown up around and the norms and value systems they have. But we are wondering, would it be possible as a development sector, in quotes, broadly, to come to a shared interpretation and understanding of what is happening, and perhaps to look at, would it be possible to chart a way forward together, despite the differences in our contexts? Would it be possible to bridge those fragmented project approaches that we have, and make sense of the situation we're in so that the impact we are looking for is delivered collectively? So again, if you allow us to take this session as an experiment, we are testing it out. It's the first time we're doing this kind of sense-making session online with groups of individuals outside of Development Dynamics. And we're just acknowledging very openly that we don't have all the answers. As Development Dynamics, as any of the individuals here, there's a limit to what we are able to perceive. However, the wisdom of how to navigate this scenario and this situation lies probably amongst us in this room, with the networks and connections that we have outside of this room. If we pulled all that knowledge together, we probably would be able to figure out our way forward. And beyond just this acknowledgement of the limitations of our understanding, and that the system we exist in is so much broader than any single person can navigate individually, we would like to build our capacity for collective action. There's a lot of talk about fragmented approaches, and it's quite obvious and clear what barriers that poses to doing good work, to doing coordinated work, to ensuring that resources are used effectively, both financial capital and human capital. And so that's part of our purpose of this session today. So just a bit more about this discussion. We are taking a participatory approach. At Development Dynamics, this is core to how we do everything. We believe that experiences, work, intelligence is enriched by the voices of different people. And so we would like to engage you all in today's activities very deliberately. We would like some volunteers if you would oblige us. And one would be a disruptor. And so the disruptor's task would be to ask, what are we ignoring as we proceed with the session? As mentioned, our individual perceptions of this reality are very limited. So and even, as an entity, as an organization, we only see a certain lens because of either our strategy, because of the geographical region that we come from. So we would really be enriched by input from this angle of what are we ignoring. Secondly, we would hope to have someone who is a connector, and the connector's task is to say, that sounds like what X person said earlier, as we proceed with the session. And so I would invite you to just quickly have a look in the participants list and see whose name is on that list. And then as we go along and as we speak and engage with each other, you would be kind of listening out for things that are appearing as recurring themes, as motifs, and they sound like perhaps we need to pay a bit more attention to these. And then thirdly, we would like a grounder. And the grounder's task would be to ask, what is the evidence for that as we proceed with the session? And in essence, what we're looking for is grounding. So we don't want to remain with the lofty ideas and theories and get caught up in abstraction about what is currently happening. So it would be great if someone were to look out for real case studies, real experiences, numbers, statistics that help us to help to bring us back to the ground when we are saying the development sector is shifting. And now I'll just pause for a moment as we all interact with this information. And then I will ask after this minute just if there are any volunteers, 3 people from the participants list who would like to take part in this: a disruptor, a connector, and a grounder. And then, of course, anyone else, please do feel free to use the chat to share insights and ask questions. An additional framing is collective sense making is very conversational. It needs to be honest, it needs to be transparent in order for it to make sense and to be meaningful. So I would invite you and encourage you to feel free to speak up. You can unmute yourself, you can raise your hand, and we can interact freely. So I'll just pause and then I'll come back and ask a few people to volunteer, and then we can proceed. All right, it's been about a minute. It's been about a minute. So do we have any takers for the disruptor? So someone who breaks through what is the norm, who disrupts, who tells us, actually, you're completely on the wrong path. Are there any takers from the participants? If you could do a thumbs up, if you could unmute, that would be great. Any takers? If you allow me, can I propose or nominate someone from the participants? Okay, I will nominate. Okay, Awar, there we go. Thank you, Awar. Awar is our disruptor, and now we need a connector. May I ask Ntenya Munyae to be our connector? Okay, can I ask Shem to be our connector? Shem, are you here? Great, thank you. And then a grounder. Peter, would you mind being our grounder?
Can I backstop for Shen on a connector?
Sure thing. Thank you so much. And a grounder. Peter, would you like to try it out?
All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll hand you over to Victor.
Thank you, Mutila. Just confirm if you can hear me, please.
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. My apologies for joining up late, and salam alaikum. I'm all the way here in Zanzibar for a project, and we've had some internet issues, but I finally managed to connect from my other meeting, and I'm here now. So we'll just walk through what Mutila said. I'm glad that we have the three individuals who'll be actually highlighting what you're doing today. But let me just take you through the approach that we are taking today. This is the first of its kind for DD, and Happy New Year to all of you. I don't know how late it is to say Happy New Year, but if I've not met you, please accept my Happy New Year greetings. So just a brief introduction into what we found about the status of the sector. As you can see from your screen, we're talking about between a collapse and transformation. This is what we have found out that the sector is actually going through. When it comes to the structural funding shifts, ODA has, of course, declined, and we've seen countries like the US and UK actually cutting their aid package and redirecting it all to defense. We're all aware that last year, US aid had been significantly reduced. And when we look at the emerging financial narratives, we are being told that blended finance is positioned as the primary solution. But as well, at the same time, African pensions and capital also remain underutilized amid a lot of capital flights into the cryptocurrency markets. And despite any localization rhetoric, we're still seeing local organizations that are experiencing some serious layoffs and closures. So what does that mean for us as we are gathered here today? And I think, as Mutila has mentioned, today we are trying to listen to the entire network. We believe that the lived experience have all the solutions, and we are sure that we can come up with solutions from this gathering today. We do not have panelists. We only have everybody who's here today to be able to tell us about their experience, not what is being said, but actually what you're going through. So I hope that is a little bit clear from what we are planning to do with this call today. So the first question that we have, and I'll open it up to anybody who's willing to take it. What do you think is emerging now? What have you experienced? What have you seen that is emerging, despite maybe your current positions, the intention that your organization was actually mandated to do with all these disruptions? What have you seen has been emerging? So please unmute. As we said, there is no protocol. You don't have to put up your hand. Just unmute and tell us what's going on from where you are. Anybody? Somebody? Is there nothing that is emerging in your organization or you've seen emerging of late in the past year?
Daniel's hand is up. You can unmute and just speak.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Maxi. And I'm seeing also your comment in the chat section. So I think for us guys, we were highly affected by the shifts that are happening in the European sort of region. And with this, we are talking about the Danish involvement in Ukraine, the Danish involvement in okay, well, they have their own issues now with Greenland. So that has significantly reduced the level of funding that we get from them. Well, used to get from them, because now that also affected my work. Yeah, I had to be let go of. They could not renew my contract end of December into the new year, owing to those shiftings, because now funding is actually being concentrated on to support Greenland and whatever they need to do to enrich their defense systems towards that, and also the involvement in the Ukraine war, because they're heavy supporters there. So there's a bit of that shift. That's pretty much all I can think of at the moment, because it directly affected me. Yeah, but looking forward to hearing much more from the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And of course, that should be something that is recurring in most of us. I think even for DD, we might not have closed down, but we felt the pinch after US aid pulled away because of some of the contracts that we were hoping to have worked on or are working on. So yes, I'm sure it is affecting everybody. Anybody else? What is emerging? Somebody?
So thank you, Victor. This is Peter here.
Yeah.
I think this is my first time here, so I'll do a brief introduction. My name is Peter. I work for MDF Training and Consultancy. It's a consulting firm. We are in the development sector. And to put a point on what's emerging, 2 years ago, we would sell a consultant for, let's say, 700 euros per day. Right now, the competition is so bad that consultants are even going as low as 350 euros per day. So I would contribute by saying that we've seen a great reduction in the daily rates, and that is in the consulting fees. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sure that has, of course, affected the bottom line, affected the way we conduct our businesses, and yes, maybe even had some few people being let go. So anybody else? This is from Beth. Can somebody read that from DD? I think Beth has a comment on the chat.
Yes, I think I can read it. Beth says, as an NGO, there are lower levels of requests for proposals available, and the current RFPs tend to be lower in value. Therefore, we have to explore other possible ways of funding, including considering of setting up a private sector entity.
Yeah, so we have all to get very innovative. We have to find ways to pivot. We have to find ways to pivot from what we've been doing. Yes, and look at what is it that is in our vault that we can actually now try and pivot from, not always looking for the usual revenue streams that we used to have in the past. Is there anybody else with a burning issue wants to say what is emerging from that section or sector?
Yes, my name is Gloria, and it's the first time I'm being on this platform. So
welcome.
I'd like to introduce myself. So I work for a human development global consult in West Africa. And I think what we see here fits into the intro that you made reference to, Victor, in the sense that there's a complete collapse and it seems everybody's running around like a headless chicken. It's as if we just woke up from a slumber in the sector and realized that, most of us, 25 years is gone down and we have nothing to hold on to. So there's a critical mass of professionals in the sector who do not know what to do next. who are on administrative leave. I am on administrative leave. A whole lot of depression here and there. People are having to sell their investments so they have money to keep up family, spirit, and soul together. In terms of the landscape, we are starting to see increased desire by organizations to want to go more into humanitarian response as against development response, or even the need to create the humanitarian and development nexus. So organizations are going with the money. They're following the money rather than having to identify critical needs that are contextual, that service the good of the people. So it's no longer doing good and doing it well. It is more of where can we get the money to meet our immediate need so that we do not collapse as an organization. So it presents a bleak future in the sense of what we understand as professionals in this landscape, and also does not kind of in quotes or in on quotes quotes a hope for the future. So there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of depression, a lot of chaos, and a longing for more of humanitarian funding, more towards humanitarian as against development. So we have seen a stall of even the progress that we have made 20 years ago. Of course, this is not connected to COVID-19, but the data we have now is even worse than what we had during COVID-19. That is just the pure the sincere truth, that the data we have now are really are not that encouraging compared to even what we had during the COVID-19 pandemic. Over.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gloria. Is there any last one that want to say before we move on to the next question? Any last person with a burning issue that would like to bring it out? And I hope the disruptor, the connector, and the grounder are looking at the screen just to see how the situation is and what is actually emerging. One last opportunity for this. Maybe it's my OCD. I just want to be able to fill in this last post-it note here so that it is balanced. Anyone?
Maybe I should step in and say that from my region in West Africa, we are starting to see collective actions amongst ministers of health in particular, where ministers of health are now coming together to say it's long overdue. We should have done this before USAID went down. So what can we do now? So there's a lot of talking. We've not seen clear action points or directive, but at least they are talking, and I think that's worthwhile.
Okay, thank you very much, Gloria. And yes, collective action is the solution, but we'll see, is it timely now? Should we have done it earlier? But sometimes we need that prick, we need that push to be able now to really act selflessly because maybe prior all this, we were very selfish and very competitive when it came to actually the RFPs that we are responding to, just to make sure that we keep the lights on. So thank you very much for this session. As I said, I hope the disruptor, the connector, and the grounder are taking notes. I'll hand it over to Mutile. Mutile?
Thank you, Victor. And maybe even before we proceed, we'd just like to create a few minutes for our volunteers to actually share if there's anything that's coming to mind already in a minute or two. So we had Peter, we had, I believe we had Awor. Anything that is piquing your interest? What are we ignoring? Or something that was said earlier and something that seems unsubstantiated and we need to find evidence for it. All right. I think we'll probably find them at the end as we proceed. And so now we are going to transition a little bit to a session that helps us to name what matters. In this digital age, there's a lot of noise. If you recall on a previous slide, we're hopefully moving from patterns and noise to clarity. There's something always happening in the world. Some agenda is seemingly always being pushed or promoted. There are new trends all the time. And so from a development dynamics perspective, we, despite existing in this ecosystem and working with partners in this sector, we have assumed with this session today that this conversation is important, but we know that the external narratives don't always reflect what is a reality internally. And so we want to discuss what actually feels important for you. So yeah, what conversations feel essential at this moment in time? What conversations would change how we navigate the present? And just as we start to think about that, maybe another way to frame the question would be, in light of these funding shifts, and all the things you've mentioned earlier, is there silence around some topics? And where might this silence cost us? Again, just opening the floor up for anyone with thoughts. Is there a silence around some topics? Is this conversation important in the first place? And how might this cost us?
Thank you, Mutila. I'm going to make an attempt to answer this. So I think that an important question that we need to be looking at is whether is there anyone benefiting from this funding crisis. A lot of things make sense in retrospect, just as during COVID. It's only 2 years, 3 years later when we started hearing stories of a business thrived while the pandemic was happening. So even in this crisis, in this funding crisis, we've been busy coping with the crisis, trying to diversify ways of funding, cutting on costs, trying to rewrite strategies to have our organizations more resilient. I think it would be important for us to stop and ask if someone is gaining, or is there an organization that is still surviving even in these difficult times. Maybe an example I can use to just contextualize what I've said is in terms of maybe firms or organizations that have streamlined their workflows through AI, because in this digital era, I think AI takes over some responsibilities that would be ideally termed as administrative costs when we are budgeting for proposals and programs. And I believe the strategic direction for 2026 would be to lean more towards efficiency in designing our programs, and even as we're budgeting for proposals. And I think AI is there to help us with that. Yeah.
Thank you, Wanjiro. Yeah, you raise an important point around who. We discuss at length the what of this situation, what is happening. Now we need to understand who is all this happening to, from two lenses, who is winning and who is losing. Yeah, and in a system or in an ecosystem, it's a thing I remember is the purpose of the system is what it does. So wherever power is concentrated, people benefit while others lose out on certain advantages. I'm curious for the rest of us on the call, have you noted specific scenarios where someone is clearly losing or someone is clearly winning? In a sense, we know a lot of us are losing the benefits of employment and so on, but have you been able to identify a stakeholder, for instance, that is gaining from the chaos that is happening now?
Well, I wouldn't really say gaining as in terms of profitability in business ecosystem, but I would say emergence to the vanguard or taking her place that she should have taken hitherto, and that is the Africa CDC. We have seen the Africa CDC become stronger in terms of more collaboration, partnership from other donors, and increased investments within the African CDC to reposition it to be that warehouse that should respond to issues having to do with health in the continent. So we have seen this emerge from this collapse. We have seen reformation around CDC and it's repositioning itself strongly, and increased funding, from China, from other donors, as it were. So that's, yes, that I have seen with the African CDC. I've also seen within West Africa, like I mentioned earlier, the health summit that took place some months ago in Ghana, and there are even more coming. We're starting to see regional blocs come together, to say, okay, like ECOWAS, that is my regional bloc. We are starting to see that coming together to say, let's see what we can do together. Africa has the resources inherently to meet her needs, and how do we work together, within the bloc, vis-a-vis other blocs within the continent, and of course, the face of the continent, which would be the African CDC. So there are a lot of conversations going on. I think also again that we're starting to see is that due to the turbulence in the sector, there's a return back home. There are a critical mass of people who are now coming back home, either from the US or from the UK, who are highly skilled and are saying, okay, how can I contribute to nation building? How can I contribute to system strengthening? However, the downside is that they have not been able to build a clear collective action of how we can harvest or harness these skills that are returning home, and how we can use them in nation building process, as it were. So there's this return home, critical mass of people coming back home who are highly skilled, within the landscape. But the issue is that there are no mechanisms within the national government of how to harness these skills. So they are everywhere in the country, but are not being able to contribute their quota into this conversation. Over.
Thank you. That's quite interesting. It sounds like the shift has forced Africa to think about its agency and its role in its own development. And perhaps, if one were to use common terms, a return to Pan-Africanism and sovereignty, which is crucial for any kind of lasting and context-relevant solutions. Would anyone else like to chime in on just a stakeholder, a group that might be gaining a gap between the official story and the lived reality that you are actually experiencing? Or even the silence around some topics. What is brushed under the carpet and would maybe unlock action? Are there any comments in the chat?
I think for me, it's how do we harness the remittances that come back home? Because if you look at it now, the country of origin of remittances are now starting to look for ways to block remittances. And if you look within the continent, the remittances play a huge contribution towards nation building. But however, we are now starting to see countries of origin of remittances starting to say you cannot remit back home anymore. You know, remittances would have been ideal in this situation that we have found ourselves, because now we are looking at innovative, well-blended approaches of how to fundraise or mobilize resources, as it were. But now there's a plug. I'm starting to hear countries of origin of remittances saying, oh, no, you can't remit. If you want to remit, you now pay 20%, you pay 10%, you know, because they now see that the people are moving money from country of origin to destination, you know, to their native countries. And this will really be helpful. So it would be good to look at how remittances can play out in this whole process. For me, I'm starting to see a shift in development. I know hitherto we are called the third sector, not for profit. I think the days of saying not for profit are over. There's a place where we start to think of profitability, because there are a critical mass of Africans outside the continent who have stockpile of money. They're happy to invest back home, but of course for profit. So how do we build that philanthropy landscape between Africans in diaspora being persuaded and convinced that when they invest back home, there are level of profitabilities they can get from this whole conversation. For me, I believe the days of not-for-profit are over.
I might say that's a disruptive thought. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, you're right. Africans are known to give. Community giving is not new. There's black tax. And perhaps just you've mentioned a clear need here for more work to understand these remittances and collectivize around them. Would anyone else like to share?
Can I just add here, Mutilo, just in support maybe of what Gloria's just said? These remittances that have been flowing to Africa or the third world for such a long time, but sometimes because of the experiences that our brothers and sisters are having, they have also developed a trust deficit. So what can we do collectively to make sure that we can actually build an infrastructure that they can actually trust, such that when they remit these resources, they're actually put to the right use, whether it is individual or as a collective, and more so as a collective, such that, yes, if there's a gap in Kenya, maybe we need X amount of money for Red Cross to be able to assist people in whatever region. We saw what happened the last time that Red Cross actually required this money. We gave and gave a lot. So if we can actually find a trust infrastructure that will be able to bring these people together and bring the remittances together, then there's a possibility for Africa as a whole to be able to gain, make substantial gain from these remittances. But also wanted to say, when it comes to losing, is there also the possibility, because of all these people who've been scattered because of losing their jobs, that this institutional knowledge, memory has been lost? Whereas when we were all working in these XYZ organizations, our efforts were all combined and focused in one direction. But now I'm out of a job. I don't know whether I'm coming or going. And so many other people are also in the same position. So what is happening to all this build-up knowledge and skill that before I can actually get a job, it has been scattered away. It's not following the framework that it has been used to in all the times that I was employed.
Thank you, Victor. And just touching on your point about a trust-based infrastructure, I think here we're speaking to the relational aspect of philanthropy, of giving. A lot of it just requires an understanding of each other's context, where people are coming from, And the technical structures can be very well placed, but if people are unable to relate to each other and trust each other, then collaboration often fails, or it exists just to check a box of this has been delivered. Yeah, thank you. Any additions? The silence around topics, conversations that would change how we navigate the present as we transition to the next session.
Allow me to just ask a question before we proceed, because with the diminishing funding or the reduction of this funding in different organizations or even different sectors or areas of service, we are also realizing that there's a lot of embrace for partnerships across sectors. We are seeing the government now working with, for instance, in Kenya, government institutions working highly with civil society organizations. And my question is, are we creating a scenario where we'll be blurring that line, where now accountability cannot be effectively demanded for, because these are the same organizations you're working with? How then do you come back and request them to be accountable for the kind of things that they're mandated with doing? So I don't know, are we creating a situation there where demanding for that accountability would be a problem? I'm just thinking, and maybe it's might not be visible immediately, but with time, perhaps it would be a problem that might be arising, or something that might need addressing in the future. So those lines are not blurred. Thank you.
Great question. Thank you so much. This is speaking to complexity of partnerships. So you think about a solution and then you realize years later that you caused many more problems. I don't know if anyone would like to share some insight on this on the call. I would love to invite thoughts from Awor, who has worked around philanthropy and partnerships with government, and anyone else who has experience in this area.
Mutile, just for my benefit, do you mind going through that prompt again?
I don't mind. So the question that was just raised was around, as we embrace partnerships now between government and civil society, is there a possibility that we are blurring the lines around accountability? So the closer you engage with people in partnership, does it become more difficult then to ask them to be accountable for their actions? And is it possible that we're heading towards that just in response to the reduced funding?
Okay. I would say no, not really. So it's about balancing the mandate. As civil society institutions, it's about balancing mandate. There are things that it's important that government does not fund, right, within civil society, especially when it comes to engaging with civic space awareness and things of human rights education, things of that nature, voter education. Are these things that should be funded by government? Yes. Are these things that government should fund civil society to do? No. Because then the narrative will lean on the bias of the funder. And then in that case, we no longer have accountability. We no longer have a civil society that is people facing. It will be more government facing. So it's important to maintain that because civil society does not really exist to oppose government. And I think that's something that's important for us to remember. It does exist, however, to amplify the voices of the constituencies that they represent within their work. So when it comes to certain things like wash, nutrition, health, agriculture, we've seen that civil society has played a major role in just enhancing and amplifying the issues within those sectors. And there have been a lot of partnerships, I would say, across the region, where civil society has worked with government within these sectors. And that does require a high level of engagement and looking at resourcing beyond capital. And there are things that have managed to be built through that. I think a really good example would be the relationships that institutions like AMREF Health Africa have managed to create with government to enable, faster responses to disease and health crisis. So they have a lot of those positive implications, but in terms of how government funds the work of civil society, it is very much sector and purpose specific, so that you do not have a cross mandates that are crossing each other, if I would put it like that, because civil society does exist to support the general public in agitating for for both blue, red rights issues. Yeah, so it's a matter of how the institutions themselves move within those partnerships and what boundaries exist within those partnerships.
Thank you, Awor. Do our disruptors and connectors have anything to point out for us?
I think in a way I agree with Au in the sense that if the organization has a courage of conviction to stay within their mandate, then we won't have issues with blur lines. But when the jungle gets difficult to navigate, how many organizations will have the courage of conviction when the going gets tough? That is something that time alone would tell us or will reveal to us. However, having said that, in the short term, I believe strongly that the values of the organizations that make up the civil society organizations, the courage of conviction, should lead the way, should guide the way in their relationship and partnership with the government. I'll just cite a quick example. Action Aid in Nigeria rarely partners with the government, because if you know the history of Action Aid, it's born from activism and then went into advocacy and stuff. But the government in Nigeria has come to recognize, like Awa has said, that the civil society is not against us per se. They want things to work with. The civil society is not the enemy. And so you see situations where the government of Nigeria would actually invite Action Aid Nigeria to a meeting and say, we know you can say the things we cannot say. This is what we want to do. This is what we are trying to do. Can you please have a look at it also and let us know what you think about it? You understand? So they understand the values, and that is because over time, Action Aid has stood for their values. But my concern now is, now that the changing funding landscape is changing and the funding are no longer there, will civil society organization have the courage of conviction to stay within their mandate, their core values, their philosophy, their ideology, and not get it mixed up? I think that is, for me, where I'm starting to think otherwise, as it were, in the long term, not in the immediate, but in the long term, if this crisis continue, as it were. Yeah, over.
Wonderful That's great insight. If there's nothing else from our grounder, our connector, and our disruptor, then we can proceed to the next part. And over to you, Awor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mutile. So now I'm wearing this hat, at least for now. Then I can go back to the other hat. So I think it's really important for us to think about what within our experiences holds true, right? Because capital flows based on where it's needed, and we experience impact based on what we are seeing, what we are living, and what, as a result of that, we would like to change, right? So that is really crucial and critical for us to think about. So I guess my question from that would be, what stories from our experiences hold a clue for how we might navigate what is coming as a result of these changes? That's really critical. So what stories from our experiences hold a clue for how we might want to navigate what is coming? Can invite anyone to speak on this. Anyone?
I'm seeing a clue, just to give it an attempt. And that's part of what's coming up in this conversation, that there's more than perhaps ever in the history of development and also in humanitarian, there is a signal to shifting power. And what I mean is that even with the collapse of what has been traditionally known as a sector of support, a sector of help, a sector of coming through when you need to come through, the conditions upon which that has been received is often from a layered power angle, where the giver, of course, remains the piper remains the one to whom the dance or the tune will move towards. So there is a growing realization, especially in Africa, from young people, from middle-aged people, that agency is not something given, and even power sharing is not something that you need to fight for. It's inherent there. And I think there's a journey to still take on both sides, on even those who mental models are shifting, but the system itself is not working with the mental models. So the systems of taxation, the systems of how corrupt the systems still are, even the most willing people to shift their mental models at times are, we can tell a clue of where that roadblock happens. However, the truth is both the corporate and development and humanitarian and philanthropy at large and private sector, there's a wokeness about what power looks like, and it's sort of like the birthing of a new season in Africa, where we do not, as Africans, need to play second party. We do not need to be referred to as third world. We see the gold that we have. We see the diamonds that we have. We see the natural resources, but also the mental, the brain capital that we have within ourselves. And we are seeing countries right now whose leaders are saying, you know what, we are paying off all aid, we are paying off all debt, sorry, and we also lock in any Westerner from interfering with our business. So and I think it's a healthy clue, and it's a healthy place to begin to see, and to I still remain very eager to track what that looks like in the next 5, 10, 15 years, which is really not a very long time from now. Yeah.
Thank you for that interesting reflection, Maxi, because there's I think I heard back there's like this call back to Pan-Africanism, to come back home, right? Both physically and metaphorically, in terms of the way we are thinking and looking at ourselves as a repository for resources, not just raw resources in terms of raw materials, when you're looking at extractives, but also in terms of intellectual labor. And that I think is a crucial point of view. Anyone else? In terms of what within our experiences are we holding true?
I think two things. First, I'm going to piggyback on what Victor said around, the wealth of experience, knowledge, within the sector that are not within the sector anymore, and how do we harness that wealth? I think it holds a clue for rebuilding the continent. Because, for instance, I have been in development for 25 years. And I'm now on administrative leave, and I'm asking myself, so what do I do with 25 years? The 25 years that cannot be captured in a CV, certainly cannot be captured in a CV, that I live with, that I move with. So how do I put it into capsules? How do I move it to the next generation? What do I do? Where do I find my other colleagues who are in the same boat with me? How can we come together? How can we network so that we can hand this to the next generation, and so that they don't need to reinvent the wheel, so that they can just take it up from where we stopped? So that is, for me, it holds a clue in terms of national rebuilding. So many things that I know, my colleagues know, people who have spent 30, 35 years in the development landscape. And yeah, these are not just people in the development landscape. These are people who are professionals. Some of us are clinicians. I'm a public health nutritionist, so I've built the 25 years on that. How do we harness this knowledge? Is there a warehouse? Is there a place where we can dump it? Is there, the prospect is there for me, but the extractive process is what is not very clear, that I think we need clarity for. Another thing I'm starting to see is, and I'm going to use my country, Nigeria, as an example, is they always say it's impossible until somebody does it. Nobody would have ever believed that the private sector would have pulled the deal of building a refinery in Nigeria. But Dangote pulled this through. And now we are starting to see other countries. Now, look at it. It's now a partnership between a country and a person. Cameroon is already advancing towards Dangote to say, if you could do it in Nigeria, please come to Cameroon. So we are seeing that rebetting, like you said, however, that Pan-Africanism. We are now seeing that rebetting of, okay, if Ghana did it in 1957, Nigeria can do it in 1960. So we are now going back to exactly what Gaddafi said, rest his soul, that whatever Africa needed, Africa had it. It's just that we didn't know. There was a lot of divide and rule within Africa, and we were not collective enough. We were not seeing through. We were seeing through the glass darkly. We were seeing through the glass faintly. And that was why I believed when USAID happened that there was going to be a silver lining that was going to come out of it. I knew it will impact me negatively, but I wanted prosperity to enjoy the benefit that will come from it. Now, so that holds a clue. If we start to see nations, making the best of this, like MaqC said, we are paying all our debts. We are not going to be careful with what we sign. We want to be, we want to look inwards. We want to produce. Also, we want to, extend our value chain. We just don't want to send away the raw materials. We also want to do. So if we start to see nations doing that, it holds a clue that the potentiality that it could generate a ripple effect is there. So if we have one nation who can do it, then we are certain that the other nations can do it. So it's now how to get that social engineering in place and how we can cause it to have a ripple effect. That is what that science, I do not have it. And I don't know if the other nations are willing to share that process. But I know Dangote has said he's happy to go to Cameroon to help Cameroon with, setting up their refinery, and any other nation that is happy to do it. Yeah. Over.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Gloria. That was a really expansive view on this. I'm just wondering if we could take like a bit of a side quest, still related to what you're saying. And I'm wondering, like, what seeds of hope are we holding? Like, what seeds of hope are you holding from your perspective that you haven't fully named?
I think for me, but it's how do I give the next generation what I know? How do I bequeath to them this wealth of knowledge? I talk to colleagues in USAID. All the database, you will not believe it, all the database and the repository of knowledge that USAID has is destroyed. Except for people who were quick enough to pull it down to get some information before everything is gone. So if you even say after this dispensation of Donald Trump, another president is going to come and wants to rebuild USAID, is literally going to rebuild it from the scratch. So I'm saying to myself, what I know, what I know is a seed of hope, but how do I communicate it to the next generation? And that is where I think collective action comes in. And that is where I'm starting to look for my friends across the continents, from East Africa, from South Africa. Can you come together? Can we work together? Can we have a monthly meeting where we can start to put this information together in capsule forms and start to give it out to the next generation? If they are happy, because Gen Z have their own mindset of how they want to run their dispensation. Over.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gloria. So it's you're thinking of how all this information, all this intelligence can be handed down to the next generation, and how can it be expanded on? And I think that's crucial, having like a living memory of all these experiences. It's really crucial. Any other perspective on this? On the which seeds of hope are you holding?
Building on that, I think youth is the currency, and this is a belief I've had ever since I was once youth myself, that the actual currency is youth. And with the likes of the very passionate our West African colleague, and how you're picturing passing on, handing on of the baton. I think the very wonderful situation we find ourselves in now is that the there's such a rising energy that that we can tell and see from everything that exists around us in civic spaces, in how youth are claiming the narrative itself. And I think when these two very powerful forces meet, a willing, experienced generation of people who are way far from their sunset years, and they can have an opportunity to hold those ones still in the earlier days, where there's a lot more energy, there's a lot more space for, should I call it, trial, maybe even recklessness, perhaps even mistakes. If we have a very beautifully or just whichever way packaged sort of an intergenerational transfer, that gives me hope. I see that, and I mean, when you're beginning to edge off into your mid-40s, into your 50s, you start thinking about what is it I wouldn't want someone who was once in my shoes to do. Or there are some mistakes that they don't have to do. I mean, they say experience is a very expensive lesson, and if at times is the only way to do, but if there is a very structured way of giving, and I don't even want to call it mentorship, I just mean, I'm just thinking about playing the long game and working with intergenerations across. There's a lot to learn from the newer rising generation, as much as there's also a lot to pass on from what has worked and not worked before. So it gives me hope, one, that there is youth as currency, and two, opportunity to have intergenerational interminglings or partnerships in that way. And then a third part is I appreciate that in this era of the digital space, we can actualize some things without needing so much of what would have been harder before. I remember at the time of the pandemic, just when it was setting up, I'd taken up a role somewhere to bring this global South community of practice that is putting together human-centered design and public health and sexual reproductive health. And we had imagined that we would convene, because this had been born out of a convening in 2018. So we'd imagined the second biannual convening would happen in 2020. And at the beginning of the year, we are somewhere in some states, and we are walking and crossing roads and begin seeing people wearing masks, begin seeing news of this nature happening, and then slowly it's announced that there is the pandemic, and all of a sudden we cannot convene the same way we needed to, and already we began seeing how then can we pivot. And we ended up with a convening somewhere around August of that year that brought together a lot of practitioners online. And that by itself was proof that, one, the cost was way down. I mean, yes, we had to put together costs and infrastructure for having like a live event across multiple time zones and geographies hosted within Kenya. So put together resources for that, but not as much resources as it would have taken to actually ship in people. So we know and I acknowledge that the place of working together and being together in one room cannot ever be replaced. But the in Swahili tunasema nusu ya kuonana. We say it's the half of seeing each other. The online space has created that ability, and I think we have opportunity to build on platforms like this one, where every last Thursday we come together, we do some sense making, and then we agree what do we do in between now and the next one to move a bit of what we are hearing here into some actions, and who else do we mobilize, and how can we, even without needing to come together in person, unless the resources allow, there is a lot that can still happen in this, just by virtue of the enabling tech ability that that exists. And yeah, back to your word.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Maxi. I'm going to follow Mutile's and Victor's cue to just ask, well, myself as a disruptor in this conversation, if I could wear that hat, if there's something to add. And of course, our connector and our grounder, if there's anything to add here from that perspective. So maybe I will wear the disruptor hat a bit and take us a bit back into the conversation before I answer to that. Like, what aren't we seeing? What are we missing? Because they're kind of connected, right? So in terms of conversations, I would change how we navigate the present. I think what we are not seeing or calling out openly is the shift, the root cause of the shift, right? So the root cause of the shift was political, plain and simple. It had nothing to do with it being ineffective. For example, in the case of USAID, it was actually more expensive to shut down than it was to run annually. So it had nothing to do with the effectiveness of USAID. It had everything to do with a political shift within the government of the US. And I think when it comes to all of these other ODA countries and ODA funding, that is, we are putting money into rearmament because national security, sovereignty, as nationalism is back. In different cloak, but more or less the same. So I don't think we are speaking to the political motivations strongly enough, and what that looks like consequently. I think we had the walkout seen around the world of some African leaders in Germany when the Secretary of State was essentially talking about, you saw what happened to Maduro and things of that nature. So these are politically motivated, and I don't think we are including that enough within these conversations. And even in terms of the involvement of China, it's purely from political dominance against the Western rivals. And what we are receiving from China is not aid, it's debt. The only difference is even the flexibility of that debt, paying in yuan instead of US dollars, is politically motivated. And I think we need to inject that conversation more into this because it will help us create a multiplicity of perspectives. In terms of what needs to be told regarding this, I would say I heard a lot about remittances. I think I heard a lot about, what are the alternatives. What we're not talking about is the motivations of private sector. When you're talking about blended finance, it means that we are working on a double bottom line, right? A lot of times impact and profit, but we are going into that without the right guardrails for us to function as a for purpose and for people sector. So we need to examine that more carefully, because going into sectors and segments like health, where there isn't a real return, right? Education, there isn't a tangible financial return. What does injecting capital that is designed to create return look like? So even when you're looking at these blended finance partnership options, we need to think about that more critically in terms of what are the guardrails that we need to put, what do we need to hedge to maintain the for people and for purpose nature of the work that we do. Then finally, to this particular prompt, or on maybe to the other one about, I know I had a lot about remittances. We are also ignoring that remittances are culturally motivated. They are not economically motivated, but culturally motivated. And even the move by the Trump administration, I think this was mentioned by Gloria, about wanting to put a tax on remittances to reduce the amount of money that's going out, specifically in the US. It's ignoring that very specific, it's a cultural pull to do so. It's a sense of responsibility that you have not built something if you've not built at home. And that is usually the prevailing cultural mindset in countries in the global majority. So we're not examining the motivations behind that enough. And I think we need to focus less on remittances and more on philanthropic cross-border flows in terms of how diaspora communities are mobilizing for philanthropic causes back home. I think that is something that we need to dive into a little more. Then in terms of the stories that hold clues, I would just tack it to the other two things I've mentioned. And we are looking at Pan-Africanism from a nationalism, a race back to nationalism, but we're not seeing it as much within the philanthropic sector. What does it mean to build? What would that look like to build from the ground up? Because we've kind of been conditioned in development to always seek from outside. So I think we need to put greater emphasis into that. Say, okay, what does it actually mean? What are the trade-offs to build from the ground up within a sector that has been influenced culturally by aid from external? What does that mean to build from internal? And that's what I was saying, whichever form we look at, motivations, root cause, because the root of how we've always operated in development has been from foreign funding, foreign aid. So what would it take for us to change our mindset culturally within the sector? I can invite our grounder and our third. I think I've forgotten.
The connector.
But basically our grounder, yes, and our connector. Thank you so much. Our grounder and our connector maybe to speak on this before I hand this back over to Victor.
Okay, so I like to step in as a connector.
Yes.
And thank you so much for highlighting the critical mass of issues, as it were. And I like to now do the connections. I like to now put in the connections. There are different types of remittances. When I got an administrative leave, I was paid an indemnity. And the question is that you can't leave that indemnity in the banking system of the US. You can't do that. So there are pockets of people all over the world who have received indemnity who will never leave their money in the banking system of the US, because forecast already sees that the banking system is heading in a direction that there's a likelihood of a depression. So remittances are while they are culturally influenced, because people want to do something, back home, people have not taken it way beyond that cultural influence to say, can I invite 5-6 people who are my friends that I know have collected indemnity, and can we go back home and put this money together, and put something that is a social enterprise, that is social entrepreneur together, that would service the needs of the people, provide us some level of profit in the long term since we are out of jobs, and then keep body and soul together. So that's we have a group in that area. When it comes to philanthropy, of course, nobody does it better than Africa. And of course, we now have to go back to the genesis. It all started from the faith-based organizations. And the question is that in this whole conversation, where are the faith-based organizations who are really the originators of charity, who are the originators of philanthropy? How can we bring them on board? Most of them run charity schools, charity healthcare service, charity social medical villages. How do we bring them into this landscape? And I've had conversation with faith-based organizations, and they will say, no, we don't want the framework and the theories of development. We don't want to use it in our implementation because the framework of development is too expensive. The consultants are expensive. You buy big jeeps and drive around the whole. No, we have our own framework in the faith-based organization that we want to use, and that is what we are going to use. So don't bring in too much English into this conversation. We know how we want to reach our beneficiaries. They are our church members. They are our mosque members. We share common faith and stuff. So I'm also looking at that. It holds a clue. Can we bring the faith-based sector back into this whole conversation as it was from Genesis? Also, I'm looking at connection from the process. Trust Africa. How was Trust Africa born? Trust Africa was born from the perspective of, okay, Africa is the home of philanthropy. Africa is the home of safety nets. We don't need to go outside Africa to get resources. We can raise resources within Africa to drive African, and that is the origin of Trust Africa. The question is, how can we mobilize? Can we mobilize 10 million Africans into a network of philanthropy? Do we even have a catalog of the high value, high net worthy Africans that we can pull together to drive this whole process, irrespective of the region that you come from? I'm looking at that. With the collapse of the sector, I'm starting to see something in the global north. Most universities are now saying, okay, we offer a degree in development studies, we offer a degree in public health, we're going to marry in a course in MBA into it. So public health will not just be public health as it used to be. If we're going to have business administration, MBA is going to be a composite of it. Because students are saying, does that mean I shouldn't go for a master's in public health anymore if it has been decategorized as no longer as a professional, no longer as a professional course? But we're starting to see teachers thinking ahead to say, no, we know what we can do. What we need to do is to integrate business administration into some of these courses so that it becomes more viable. With or without the NGO sector, you can do what you need to do. You can think like a social entrepreneur. You can make money out of dust. So we are starting to see that. We're starting to see that connectivity. And what we are starting to also see in West Africa, I don't speak for East Africa because I know little about that. You are starting to see the emergence of individuals, just to buttress the issue around philanthropy. People say, okay, I have the money, but I'm not giving it to the government. I know the need of my people. I'm going to step out there and fix the needs of my people and, provide for them the services they need. But sadly, something I'm not saying is that in the whole of these debates, the people we want to serve, I'm not hearing their voices. In the early days of USAID, a lot of conversation was everywhere in Africa. It's true, scrap USAID, they are eating the money doesn't get to us, let them go. So that dust has settled now. the people who made these comments have not come to now tell us how they think, we can paddle the canoe forward. In my own climb, I'm starting to see increase in tax. There's an increase in swelling in tax. So the government, maybe the government is starting to say, okay, another way for us to, raise money is to increase tax, across board. The taxes were not high enough, let's increase tax. But of course, there are issues around tax havens, there's issues around tax justice. I don't think Africans are afraid to pay tax. It's just that Africans are not convinced and persuaded that tax paid will be used as justly as they claim that they will be used. That is one issue that we have in Africa. That would be also a good connector, as it were. Africa, we've not gotten to that level where we have young people like in China who are millionaires, but we're starting to see that, like what MaqC said, of course, the youth is the currency. But my challenge with the youths in Africa is around issues on character, integrity, ability to say, I will do it, and they do it. Ability to contain wealth. The Bible says it takes strength to manage wealth. That strength of character, integrity, ability to contain wealth and plow it back into the system so that, there's a multiplicity of wealth, as it were, instead of, just going for a party. This way.
Gloria, are you still there?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, I dropped off for a minute. So those are some of the issues. Of course, we know Africa will continue to grow in terms of population for the next half a century. And of course, our wealth will be our young people. So how do we also bring this wealth, like MaqC have said, the youth are the currency? How do we galvanize them into this whole process? How do we build the trust bank within Africa between us as citizens and our government? So those are, for me, some of the painted areas that are not clear. But of course, I agree with you on all the other issues that you've raised. I'm just trying to do a connection across board. Over.
Thank you so much, Gloria, for connecting to all those critical issues: tax, youth, growing population, priorities, and the idea of suggesting or speaking on something, but then we are still quite slow on the solutions to replace things like what you are seeing, the US aid funding freeze. I don't know if we have a note, perhaps from our grounder.
Thank you, Awol. I think I fumbled. The grounder was to say what is the evidence for that, and I think it's practically impossible to go through everything that we've discussed, and the grounder asking what's the evidence for that. But I think I can quickly just mention a few things that have actually spoken to me in terms of the remittances, and then there's the philanthropy. And then we have the connections across Africa. We have youth as the currency, and we have the intergenerational partnerships, and also matters taxation. So the question was, what's the evidence for this? Somebody said, is there a collapse of the development sector? So according to the evidence I've gathered at the ground, I say no, but there is evidence of funding slowdowns, there's shocks, there's restructuring pressure, but I would not say there's a collapse of the development sector. So if you look at sources, documents from the OECD, which usually tracks and shows that it's a global tracker, you'll see that this year the funds disbursed have been on a very high low, but they are not zero. We still have so many major institutions operating, like the World Bank. We recently won a project with the IMF. So they are still operating. So we cannot say it's dead. It's just that there's a slowdown. So as your grounder, there's evidence to a slowdown, but there is no evidence for a collapse. When we come to remittances, it's true. Global data from the World Bank shows that we remit billions. And it's funny because it's coming majorly as a philanthropy, because one of the main global benchmarkers, the Charities Aid Foundation, gave their index and said most of this money coming back is to help a stranger, to donate money, to volunteer time. So philanthropy is on a record high, and there is evidence, clear evidence supporting that. So there is evidence supporting remittances, there is evidence supporting philanthropy, and there is evidence supporting that there is no collapse in the development sector. It's just a slowdown. Next Thursday, I'll do better. At least I've tried today. Thank you, Awar.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Gloria, for your insights. I'll hand it over to Victor.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Awar. Thank you, Peter. And especially thank you to Gloria. You have been an A student today. You're index number 1 for sure. If you are giving prizes, you definitely take the top prize for participation. So now we're supposed just to look at 3 things again. At DD, we really like playing our cards in 3s. So now we're looking at what are the insights that have, what are the patterns that are emerging today? What are the insights as well that we have seen that have landed with a lot of weight for you? And finally, what action should we take going forward? Should this end just here after this meeting, or should we have something else that much more? So the patterns, I think, have come up quite clearly. We've seen that, yes, there's a lot of remittances from our brothers and sisters abroad. We have seen that youth are definitely the currency of Africa. We all know, yes, we have the most youthful demographic across the world, and that we shall continue because, yes, we're still having more kids, whereas some countries in Asia, they have only 1 kid and they're being actually encouraged to have more kids, whereas we don't need that. Taxation, whether it is internal at our home country or from the south where these remittances are coming from, to try and delay that remittance. So we've seen a lot of tax, but we were asking, shall we be able to experience some tax justice as we go along? Our ground now, Peter has told us this, although we thought that there was a collapse of the sector, actually that is not the case. Maybe the slowdown has been so big, the disruption has been so much that we've really been caught in a flap and we think that everything is actually falling apart. So the sector is not falling apart, but maybe there's just some realignment because of all the disruption that has happened. This nationalism across, whether again from the north or from the south. People, the traditional donors are now spending more money on defense than actually giving fund to aid. So, I mean, that is something that has clearly emerged. So this slowdown, what is it causing? It is causing some African sovereignty to actually come through. We have to find better ways to work together. We have to be able to build this collective that can be able to deliver on the gaps that we have also been able to realize. So collectivism is actually coming out as a very strong indicator. So what are some of the insights that we are seeing across the board? I wonder if there's anybody who wants to contribute here, just to say what insights have you seen today from all these things that we've had being contributed today? I think if I can start us off, what is quite interesting for me, I don't know who said this, but apparently China is not giving us loans, it is giving us debts. So maybe that is something that we should watch out for. as readily available as it might be, what is the impact that it is having in our country. A big surprise for me that I saw actually on my first trip here the beginning of this month to come to Zanzibar for this project is like at our national airport, they moved from speaking English to announcing in Chinese. We are not even hearing any French, any German, or any Spanish, or Portuguese for that matter. Yes, I had some announcements being done in Chinese. So again, those debts that we are getting, they're coming in more ways than one. So we have to be able to look at that. So I wonder, anybody else from the DD team, all the participants are in today, what kind of insights are we seeing that are actually coming out from all these reflections that we're having today?
Could I jump in, perhaps?
Yes, please.
Just something that came to mind when we were talking about remittances, and when we're talking about youth as well. I think there is this everlasting tension. I'll start with the youth question. Well, there's a lot of hope that and there's a lot of agency as the generations get younger. I think there's also something to be said about the tension that has continued to persist between passion and expertise. And the way we have dichotomized development is we'll only talk, especially within our in the global majority, especially in Africa, we know it's papers talk. So you might have a lot of lived experience, might have a lot of insight from the ground up, but if you don't have papers to back it up, people will not listen to you. And the younger you are, because of the costs, right, the less likely you are to have those papers that give you legitimacy. So I think there's something for us to think about. How do we shift what is important in terms of knowledge? I think a lot of that comes from a colonial legacy of how knowledge or intelligence is measured. And that's something for us to think about. The second thing I would say is localization. I think it's very difficult to localize solutions when you don't even examine ourselves within our own languages. And language is a very big part of localization. And I do not think we have naturalized our own languages enough within the sector that the nuances, those cultural nuances that we always talk about that make solutions intuitive are lost. They are really literally lost in translation, quite literally, because we work in English, we work in French, we work in Portuguese, we work in Spanish, but we do not work in Kiswahili, we don't work in Yoruba, we don't work in Hausa, we don't work in all these languages. We don't. And there's a lot that we lose in translation in terms of knowledge that has been inherently passed down, because a lot of our traditions orally are passed down in our own languages. But it's difficult to translate local intelligence into localized solutions if you're not talking about the issues in our own language and the solutions in our own language. The last thing I would speak to would be and I think Gloria mentioned this, the state of the economy. You have, for instance, in our situation here in Kenya, where the cost of living is high because the cost of commodities is high, but you do not have a high inflation rate. But then you can see there's an argument, like, I mean, the inflation rate is more or less stable when you look at the numbers, right? On the central, because they're available on the central bank website month by month. But the cost of commodities is high. And what the people feel is the cost of commodities. And as long as the cost of commodities is high, the likelihood that I would want to apportion what I earn in a regime where I'm highly taxed, and because of that high tax regime, the cost of commodities are high. Therefore, it's more expensive for me to be able to afford my basic needs. The likelihood of me being able to give is going to reduce, right? The likelihood and even in some cases the amount. So I think it would be remiss for us to divorce economic tensions and the needs of the sector when we are talking about growing from the ground up. We will need to do more, I think, on that front, and not just in terms of pointing out the problems, but hey, these are the alternatives. This is where we see philanthropy being able to, or development or social enterprises being able to ease this. Maybe it's a conversation that we may need to have in terms of what would that look like, but it's something for us to definitely explore.
Okay.
What you?
Thank you. Thank you. So what actions then do we want to take going forward? What do we need to do differently? We've met here today as a collective. We've shared our understanding of what the situation is. We thought maybe the sector was in dire collapse. We have been told by a grounder that it is just disrupted. It is not actually failing. So what actions should we take forward today? Here I'm actually open to hear any suggestions to give us the light at the end of the tunnel. And we hope that light is not an oncoming train.
I think, okay. Over.
Yeah. Okay, I would have let you go. We say ladies first. We'll speak. Go ahead, Gloria.
Okay, thank you so much. That should be Maxi, yeah? Okay, Mangi. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
when I was speaking, something that a light bulb came, switched on in me, and that light bulb is volunteerism. We've lost volunteerism completely in Africa. No thanks to the World Bank, who pays for virtually everything. They pay for you to drink water and then record it as an indicator. So I think if we are really going to get our boots on the ground to do localization, we have to bring back volunteerism. It's difficult for anybody to do anything for you for free in Africa. I don't know if it's the same in East Africa, but in West Africa, even the young children, you can't even send them on an errand. They'll be looking at you like, so and so what? So what's next? So, and that is not us. That is not who we are as Africans. Your mother could literally leave you with a neighbor and feel safe, because it was a shared shared value, shared space, shared community, shared prospect, shared wealth, So I don't know how we can bring it back, because I see it's going to really help. If we have a critical mass of people who are leaving the sector and they have this wealth of knowledge and they can speak the local language, they can really help address the issue that Awa was making reference to. I'm not Yoruba, but I speak fluently Yoruba. So I'm happy to communicate to the Yoruba speaking community some of the things that I know of. I found myself in a community where everybody was talking against the federal government, and I had to walk them through how the federal government generates resources. And they said nobody has ever told them about that. They just feel that there's a bag of money somewhere, and that is the responsibility of the federal government to dole it out every month. And I was like, do you know, guys, we have to sell crude oil. And if we don't sell, there's no money coming. What do you think? How do you think we get money? I had to walk them through that process. So that localization, that local community participation, where people, we communicate some of these issues in local language and people can understand it, they can own the processes, they can understand where government is coming from, not to absorb the government, in some cases, but I think volunteerism it's good for us to go back to that. And you see that in the Western world. There's a whole lot of volunteerism in the Western world. A whole lot of it. People are in the food bank. When they are free, they are off, they are working in the food bank. People are cleaning the beaches. People are in the subway. People are doing this. People are doing that, as their own contribution. So we need to see that. For me, I think it's one of the actions that really needs to come back And then secondly, I think it's high time we really scrutinize some of these documents that the World Bank shows through our throats in Africa. In 85, they woke up and they told us about SAP, and that was how they destroyed everything. And they've not changed, because they sit down in Washington and in New York drinking coffee and tea and smoking cigar, and and putting these policies together when they don't have a clue of localization, what we go through. And like how I was saying, if you are taxing me and food is so expensive, how do I become a part of philanthropy? How do I, there's a proverb in Yoruba that if somebody is going to give you a dress, you have to look at the dress the person is wearing. So if I'm wearing rags and I'm handing you a dress, you should be cautious that there must be something behind that dress, because you can't have a good dress and you're wearing rags. So these are some of the issues. It's time we need to start looking critically at some of these documents that are handed down to us in Africa. We need to develop documents that are contextual, that speak to our own conditions, our language, and our needs as Africans, as it were. It's not one box fits all. There's no silver bullet in this issue. We need to create our own solutions to our own problems as Africans.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Gloria. It seems like these are very broad, reaching issues, but I wonder, is there anything that we can do amongst the participants of this call today? Is there anything that we can take action, either as 2 organizations, 3 individuals, or as an entire collective? Any ideas?
Could I mention
Victor?
something?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Okay, I had posted in the chat that the power of co-funding, matching, partner matching. We've been doing several grants in the past, and this matching has been standing at around 5 to 10% of the entire project value. With the recent changes and restructuring, we've seen donors requesting for even up to 40% co-funding. So I think if we, and co-funding comes in different ways. Like in an organization, you can even do staff time. This is consulting days. You can do in-kind contribution. It doesn't have to be actual money. So my insight would be, if we can move to a more rather partnered structured thingy, where we show the donor that we can actually bring in value by co-funding in this assignment or project, I think that will really, really increase our chances of getting the funding.
That's very interesting. I'm sure before we close today, you'll hear about something called PPPP from one and only MaqC, and see how that fits in here.
All right.
One last thing, maybe before, I think I don't want to keep you more than I should, and I think we're just close to the top of the hour. Any other quick action point that we need to do before we call MaqC just to take us home, so to speak?
I wanted to mention something that maybe MaqC can expound on.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot about collectivization in this conversation, and I think developing local frameworks like the spectrum of collective impact to work within the sector across subsectors in development is a good starting point in terms of how do we bring together what we have to change the tide of philanthropy being influenced and development being influenced from the outside. And of course, the 5P framework, which we're working in partnership with the East Africa Philanthropy Network to develop as a way to answer the question on these capital flows. But I'm sure MaqC will expound more. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe before I bring in MaqC, I just wanted to find out, can we post the form that if anybody wants to partner, they can do that directly? You can fill in your name, your contacts. There's the box for consent, so that yes, the information can be shared or can be seen by anybody on this call, so that if you want to take this forward, you can take this forward. And also, we'll be looking at maybe partnering on the next last Thursday. So Maxi, please welcome and tell us what you've observed today.
I will not do the duty of being redundant and try to summarize anything. I think that has come so clearly from everyone who's spoken. I only want to point towards two things that I think are important. Three. The Bible says two, and then it adds another one often. So the first one is what's on screen. This conversation today has been very enriching, and I love the fact that it's been small and intimate. And I think for me, that's way much more productive than having like a whole bunch of people and having one person present. I love how the discussion here has been organic. We sort of are hoping that we can keep these kinds of conversations going. And what's on screen is an opportunity for you to these are last Thursdays. The platform is created, the Zoom is paid for, so we can record. At the very least, even in the spirit of partnering, a lot of level of effort goes into just coordinating this. And I think a clear thing I am hearing, and as a challenge to even ourselves, is we don't ever need to go into any room as the lower partner, because the value in just the human capital, we are doing a valuation process for development dynamics, and it was very interesting. We do not have assets that we own necessarily, but there is a lot of intellectual capacity, models and frameworks that are priced so high, yet we are just in the process of even trying to codify a few of them and trying to copyright a few of them, and maybe the stocks of those could go higher. And our hope is that one day this will go much higher than frameworks from McKinsey and Dalberg and the rest, because this is African rooted. And so we want to keep the channels of communication and partnership and collaboration, and especially sense making together. And last Thursdays is the platform for that. So we invite you to screenshot this or take scan it, and let us know which topic or conversation we can have together. But the second part outside of this is that I do think, as great as the conversation today is, I would hope to challenge all of us who are here. We are not very many. Outside of the development dynamics team, I saw Beth Kagwara, Gloria Momo, Michelle Marina, Ndanye Munyae, Peter Njuguna, Gertrude Opande, Michael Kiragu, Winnie Nyambege, Francis Namuju, and Grace Mshoperi. I would wish to invite us, under the leadership of Victor and Mutile, to do a document together that is resulting from this. We can offer the first draft of synthesis from this, but invite you. We all co-author. We all have been in this space together. The knowledge that has been exchanged here has been because of everyone who is here. I think the product from this, a synthesis from this that is maybe packaged in a document or a thought piece, a co-shared thought piece, we can begin to popularize some of this, because that's what's lacking in the sector. If we are looking for information about our sectors, a lot of it is Western fed. And we hope that just as a synthesis of this that goes to this small collective, we can all, within 2 or 3 weeks period, co-author something that we release together, saying these are the contributors of this particular thought piece, and we can knock to different doors and say, these are some things, what we are saying here as insights that we are pulling as the year of 2026 begins, and hopefully offer that together. And then in the similar spirit, Awar and others have mentioned that we have frameworks that we are creating that allow for a lot more African epistemology and Africanness and the Ubuntu spirit to guide what kind of insights we collect and how, especially local and tacit knowledge being at primary. And then secondly, guide what kind of innovations are then driven on ground in a local African context, of course, knowing the differences of those. And then number three, how does capital flow from whom to who, and what are the trust and power structures that go around with that? And we have organized development dynamics in that lens, where one party is totally thinking about insights and foresights of sectors and ecosystems. The other side is building collective agency and thinking around the strategies and the frameworks for collaboration in ecosystems and in systems. And the third one is all about connecting innovations to capital and capital to where change is actually happening. And to guide that work, we have been, over the last 6-7 months, been generating together another co-written piece that is called the Spectrum of Collective Impact. And to this small intimate team, we would love to offer an extension for you to. It's a huge document, but it has a preamble and a chapter 1, which we would invite you to engage, leave comments. These become things and tools that we one of the reflections that came here is that we do not need to commercialize everything. We do not need to commoditize everything. We do not need to productivize everything. Volunteerism, in terms of even our brain capital, is one thing that can take us ahead. So those are just 3 calls for action, and we'll be coming back after we review what kind of topics could be carried forward in these kinds of dialogues that we have together as last Thursdays, and we will reach back to you either for co-creation or even for sharing with a few other people. We don't mind if it grows in number, but we are keen to keep it intimate and small enough for good, rich conversations of this nature that lead to products. And when I say products, I mean intelligent outputs, not necessarily anything out there for sale. So thank you so much, everyone who has been behind been working together to put this last Thursdays out as the first one of this year. The episode will be uploaded hopefully by end of day tomorrow. It will be living on the Development Dynamics YouTube page. We can revisit in a couple of weeks' time. We can collaborate on a synthesis of what this sector is about, so that beyond the dialogue today, we can have something that we feed others into other formats, maybe as briefs or that kind of thing. And I appreciate everyone who was able to join and everyone who stuck with us till this period. And with that, I say sayonara. Let's see you on the other side.
Thank you, MaqC.
If you want to continue in the meeting, I guess we can go to part 3 or part 4 of the day. I see that there is still more comments coming. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Back to you, Victor and Mutila.
Thank you. I don't think there's anything much else to add. You've stayed with us till 6 o'clock. This was a very good start to this year, and we are hoping to have many more co-creation opportunities with everybody on this call today, and maybe more of your friends and your colleagues to be able to generate more interest in this very new approach. So thank you. Have a good evening, and see you at the next last Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for having me.
Irene, thank
Bye-bye.
you. It's
Hey.
been a great session.
Thank you. So we've stopped the recording.